Honest George. My name is Larry Robinson. I'm an elder with the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. I really enjoy working with the students at Eddy. I hope you enjoy the video.
Rad Company Films will research and explore how Indigenous people living in border towns are utilizing art, language, and the knowledge of elders to revitalize their cultural identity. Our goal is to produce a documentary that showcases the cultural transformation currently taking place in the community. Our film will highlight the social and educational revolution occurring in Native communities across the nation.
De recorrer en el camión el vecindario y así pasa todos los días con familiares, amigos, vecinos desaparecidas, cercan trucos sin magia, la policía toca el son de la tortura, esta versión es sin censura, policía basura, pensaron que...
Una de las intenciones es buscar que las mujeres salgamos juntas a pintar, salgamos juntas a exigir que nos dejen vivir, ¿no? Salgamos juntas a demandar pues los derechos humanos y todas estas luchas, ¿no? Que están en proceso por parte de las mujeres.
Esmeralda Guadalupe García Romero, ¡aquí estamos!
In 1492, as European nations conquered foreign lands, they used a religious rationale called the doctrine of discovery. Pope Alexander VI, author of the Doctrine of Discovery, published by the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, reinforces the idea of colonization through his statement: any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be claimed and exploited by Christian rulers, and declared that the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread. The Pope explains how the indigenous people were oppressed due to the stripping of their religion and being replaced with another culture's language. Andrew Jackson continues the colonization with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which authorized the president to grant unsettled lands west of the Mississippi in exchange for Indian lands within existing borders. Although we know that these lands were not unsettled, this was an issue for the indigenous people because it was part of the colonizing process. Historically, we can see how foreign countries have justified acquiring native lands. However, this practice still continues today.
We started out today by welcoming you to the Nawakali Embassy of Indigenous Peoples. We understand that your students and your course of study that brought you here to do is the subject of language, one language in particular, English. Right? And the word England, actually a German term. The Angles is the name of a German tribe that came off the mainland of Europe and invaded Europe, took it over, and since then it was called England. But the original term before the Romans were called from the Breton. That's why they call it Great Britain. So there's an indigenous peoples there as well, and indigenous history is there as well. This is a good dimension of study for anybody studying any language. But speaking of that welcome that we gave you earlier, I must warn you, maybe you should leave now. Maybe you might want to think about, I better get out of here quick. Why? Because you can't come in here, you can't walk on this world. If you stay, you can't walk anywhere in this world anymore and say, well, nobody ever told me that colonization was it. Nobody ever told me that genocide is still going. Nobody ever told me that the indigenous peoples are fighting for self-determination. I never knew that. So therefore, you can just walk around and you won't have to think about that. But if you stay, maybe you should leave. Because why? Knowledge is responsibility.
According to one of our Rad Company videos, the San Carlos Apache Nation is currently fighting the federal government over their ancestral lands against a lucrative deal struck by Senator John McCain of Arizona with two foreign-owned copper mining corporations.
When you hear people say that the native wars of the government taking Indian land and that happened a long time ago, how does that make you feel?
when people come up to me and say, this is not your land is on the reservation, what they don't realize and what they don't understand is that the reservation is a prison. It's a federal land. It's not ours. It's the government's land. And so that upsets me because it's like, you don't understand what our people go through, the poverty that we go through, the unemployment rate that we go through. I live in the reservation and I see every day my people pain, hurting, and they don't understand that Oak Flat is just right next to the reservation. And before the reservation got shrunken by the copper mining, by the U.S. government, Oak Flat was a part of the reservation. And even before that, Oak Flat was our land. And so it upsets me because we are still getting land taken away today. Right now, what is going on today with the bill, with this being passed, it's going on. It's still going on. It has not been the past. It's still here with us. Dagote, she Nolan Pike Gonze, she San Carlos Goliu, Shata Shama, Willie Pike Vanessa Nosi, Shitija, Nijoni and Bonse Pike, Shanale, Shawaya, Wensler and Tasa Nosi and Cindy Nosi, Shacho, Shachana, Chuck and Jelly Pike, she is Dinaya, she Berdonkahe, she Chirikawa. Hello, my name is Nolan Pike. I am from the San Carlos Apache tribe. My mother and father are Vanessa Nosi and Willie Pike. My younger siblings are Najoni and Bonse Pike. My maternal grandparents are Wensler and Tisa Nosi and Cindy Nosi. My paternal grandparents are Chuck and Geraldine Pike. My clan is Sistinaya. I am from the Badonkahe band and I am Chiricahua Apache.
Exploitation does not discriminate. Across the North American continent, there are similarities of indigenous people combating the issues borders contrive, such as not being able to cross over or being oppressed by an intrusive government outside of their own sovereign nation. Sarah Singleton, PhD, author of Not Our Borders, Indigenous People and the Struggle to Maintain Shared Lives and Cultures in Post-9/11 North America, in 2009 published by Border Policy Research Institute at Western Washington University, states, the Texas Band of Kickapoo, for example, has both Mexican and U.S. members and has for decades lived in Nacimiento, Mexico during winter and traveled to Eagle Pass to work as migrant farmhands for the rest of the year. The most infamous border issues involve the U.S. and Mexico borders due to the immigration and economic issues of both countries. According to the Tohono O'odham Nation, the U.S.-Mexico border has become an artificial barrier to the freedom of the Tohono O'odham to traverse their lands, impairing their ability to collect foods and materials needed to sustain their culture and to visit family members and traditional sacred sites. Elders with no tribal citizenship cannot cross the borders to transmit the knowledge to the younger generations, essentially cutting families in half.
My name is Wensler Nosey. I'm from the San Carlos Apache tribe. I'm a Stinayan, which is to the band of Badonkahe, which is the Chiricahua people. And what we're doing here is having a spiritual gathering on account of what happened in Washington, D.C. What happened was that there is our holy land, our sacred land here that's been under attack or has been under attack with a bill from Resolution Copper that is proposing a mine here, which now that the bill has passed as an attachment to the National Defense Bill, before any action is being taken, the Native Americans and ourselves and our alliance and everybody, we need to stand because something very terrible happened in Washington, D.C. With what they did was that by attaching this bill, they cut off our voices, they cut off our religion, and this affects all Indian country. And in the manner they did, it also affects the world indigenous people, only because indigenous people throughout the world also rely on the United States of being the country that protects our kind of people all over the world, that human rights are protected. But with the United States doing what they did, now affects the whole world because now they have no one to lean on. And so we had a walk here from the San Carlos Reservation to here, and it's 44 miles plus, and it's to now unify as people, to stand in solidarity with other alliance, which would mean the Christian people, would mean organizations, even with congressional people, tribal leadership, because we have to push and make sure that Congress takes back what action they made during this lame duck session.
Educating others can be shared orally and can be passed down generation to generation. Paulson Rhonda L. Arthur of Native Literacy, A Living Language, published online by the University of Alberta Faculty of Education in 2003, writes, "In traditional Native education, learning is passed down from generation to generation orally and through sharing experiences. When teachings are passed from the elders to younger generation, literacy takes on the traditional form and is being lived out in contemporary society. When you're sharing teachings to younger generations, tradition is being lived and passed on and not being abandoned."
Alfred Yazzie lecture, take one.
Alfred Yazzie, das ist nicht hoch an der Insel. Das ist dann etwas schön. My disguise, das ist schön, touching. Not touching it, das ist nala. Ich hab ego, it in Insel. Ich hab ego, nabeho, das ist nicht, trachten Insel. Besche, listen. That is my identifier. It is my 4 clans, my mom's, my dad's, my grandfather on my mom's side, and then my grandfather on my father's side.
Research staff, author of Native American Religion, published online by Indians.org in 1995, writes, "In the place of preachers and clergymen were shaman and medicine men. These men were said to communicate with God. They had important roles in decisions, ceremonies, and traditions. People educate others by doing something like action, ceremonies, decisions we make, and traditions. Educating younger people is like doing little things that can make a huge difference in the end."
Okay. Dr. Price, questions, take one.
So, this is an amazing fortress, really gives good shade. Where does it come from? What's the background?
Well, I guess in your English term you would call it a brush arbor. But in our language, it's called wasihelva, and these are traditional, really like traditional homes, maybe really summer homes. So you can tell the difference just coming as you walk from the river, how cool it is. So this is how we used to live. I actually grew up in one of these brush arbors when I was young, like you people are here, and lived all our life. And it was a huge one. Everything was under there. Our cooking, our beds, everything, was under one of these. And like I said, during the summertime to get it cooler, my great-grandpa used to wet canvas. So soak canvas, wet it, then put it on that when the wind blows, ice cold, especially in the evening.
So lagi today squash the do squeeze down a day so one did lucky. That's a one east to get a letter like a guess get your chesty.
Katua, we're enrolled Katua, and it's the tie to culture, it's the tie to history, it's the tie to everything. It's what makes us us. It's also what separates us and makes us unique as Katua people. We are capable of speaking and saying what we feel in our own language.
Mark Macaro, Revitalizing Native Cultures, published online by Native American Telecommunications in 2006, writes, "Across the country there are now innovative programs dedicated to revitalizing native languages. Some tribes are using casino money to set up language immersion programs where young students speak the language all day with elders who learned it at home. By practicing the language on a daily basis, they can increase people's motivations to learn about their native language, such as artists and musicians. They can express their emotions and storytelling. The loss of language means that ceremonies are no longer performed in the language. Stories are no longer told. Even if the stories have been translated into English, much of the meaning has been lost. By having elders educating younger generations, they can learn how to speak their native language and learn about their culture."
Language lesson, take 8.
Kamyuche manya, banyam gwemap chahi gwe gawi chahi haparachanu. So today we're going to learn about our table setting. So I'm going to show the pictures, and then I'll say it twice, and you say it twice back to me. And this first one is aquathiyi. Aquathii.
One more time. Aquathii. Aquathii.
Solutions. Since the beginning of American colonization, Native Americans have been viewed by people of European descent as less than others. Despite this, laws have been made to give tribes their own sovereignty. Andrew Maziel, author of Tribal Sovereignty, History, and the Law, published by the Native American Caucus in 2010, says, in 1831, the Supreme Court agreed in the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia that Indian nations had full legal rights to manage their own affairs, govern themselves internally, and engage in legal and political relationships with the federal government and its subdivisions. A major issue among the Indigenous community is the border. Indigenous people have decided to make the public aware of the border issue in hopes the U.S. government will help rectify the problem. Jonathan Markovitz, author of Blurring the Lines, Art on the Border, published by Postmodern Culture in 1994, writes, one of the ways this prior orientation is established is through reviews of the exhibit, nearly all of which have focused on racism, imperialism, and border zone policing practices. Markovitz clearly describes how the Indigenous people have been very unhappy with the government's policies regarding the border since the beginning. There are many ways to shed light on this topic. Some people chose to write about the issue, while others take pictures and film of people crossing the border in hopes of reaching a better life. Matt Stromberg, author of Tijuana, LA, and Border Crossings with Contemporary Art, published in 2014 by Hyperallergic Media, explains in his Nightscope series 2000 to 2003, Lewis Hawk captures nocturnal images of illegal crossings in night vision green. From Lewis's art, it is clear to see that many people do not see the border as anything more than a wall. Several other artists have also decided to bear the burden of the U.S. border issue. Arturo Damasco is one of these artists. He is a muralist. He has recently done several murals in the border town of Juarez to help bring the community out of its violence and poverty. Luis Hernandez, author of New Art Brings Good Memories Back to the Old Juarez Mercado, published by Borderzine in 2012, writes, folkloric depictions of mariachis, skulls, piñatas, puppets, and historical figures adore the old market's murals. The initial impact of the lively colors was enough to catch anyone's attention, but the sheer detail and abundance of these images almost forces you to stay and contemplate them. From his simple description of the murals, it is clear to see how much of an influence art can have on the town's morale. In fact, art may be the main ingredient of change in Juarez. By bringing the topic to public life, writers and artists hope to persuade the government into helping find solutions to the many issues along the border.
If anybody has any doubt in being a Christian and holding their Bible, many of them will board a plane or get on a ship and go back overseas to cross-reference with what the Bible is, and they go to the Holy Lands. Well, for us Native people, it's embedded in our language, it's embedded in our ceremonies, it's embedded in our songs, and it's embedded in just our character. And so for us in teaching that, and for our children that may question it, can go actually to the holy sites here in North America and touch those places. And no different than the kids that do that with the Bible. That's the difference, because once this is gone, then how are our children going to relate to the holy places? Because it's not overseas, it's here for us. When people go from here overseas, they respect what God had done there. They hold that dear, because that's important. Well, we don't see the difference. When greed is involved, for individual people, these kind of things, chaos would happen. So it's going to hurt our children. The ones yet to be born, the ones that yet to bear any children, will have no reference to take their children to, as my mother did, her grandmother did for her, and then now my daughters for their children, my son for their children, especially them. That's going to be gone.